tour. Today's webinar is entitled Libraries We Mean Business, Best Ideas from LJ's Best Business Books of the Year, presented by Chris Brown, Lisa Dale, and Deborah LaPoma. I'm now happy to introduce Chris, Lisa, and Deborah.
Thank you, Eileen, and thank you, info people. Welcome to Libraries We Mean Business, Best Ideas from Library Journal's Best Business Books of the Year. I'm Chris Brown, a librarian from Contra Costa County Library.
And I'm Lisa Dale, the Assistant Director of Library Services for Placer County Library.
And I'm Deborah LaPoma, a librarian at Santa Cruz Public Libraries.
So when Deborah, Lisa, and I started looking at the topic of business literature, the problem really came up of how do you keep up with all the books out there, all the business literature? And like most of you, we look for resources that are going to help us out, help us to narrow down that field. And our group looked towards Library Journal.
So we're here today to highlight this resource and give you a sampling of some of the best in business books. Although Library Journal's best business books included titles in a wide variety of categories, we selected 4 categories that we thought were most applicable to the library environment: management and leadership, marketing, organizational dynamics, and success. And then from within these categories, chose a selection of titles. Although these books held numerous ideas, we are highlighting a few from each and sharing examples from our own libraries as well as others. We encourage you to share your own ideas and examples throughout this webinar via the chat box. We hope the next hour will be an open dialogue so that we can all learn from each other. If you have questions about any of the books or topics in this presentation, please type them in the Q&A box at the bottom there, and we will answer at the end of the presentation. As Chris, Deborah, and I are library professionals who enjoy reading business books, we encourage you to use this webinar as a starting point for obtaining the best business practices to evaluate in your own libraries. So we're going to start today with the category of management and leadership. And effective management and leadership is important for any organization, but it is even more important and relevant for libraries today. We're facing difficult economic times, challenging circumstances that require a high level of management skill and the ability to lead and engage staff at all levels. The books we are discussing today provide tools and ideas to help you move your organization forward as an effective manager and leader. The 3 books we are discussing are Good Boss, Bad Boss by Robert Sutton, Employees First, Customers Second by Vineet Nayar, and The Intangibles of Leadership by Richard Davis. So as we get started, I'd like you to think about someone who was or is a good boss, and then type in the chat box what it is that made them effective.
And Lisa, I know, from my personal experience that the best bosses have not only been people who held me accountable to the work I produced, but really placed a priority on, how I felt at work. And that translated really into coming to work, feeling good every day, and producing my best results.
Yeah, and like Melissa says, progressive, good sense of humor. I'm all about good sense of humor too. Be people who listen effectively, are collaborative. For me, I like a boss who gives me, a direction and then lets me run with it. And this book, Good Boss, Bad Boss, discusses some common traits of great bosses and provides numerous examples and case studies. Overall, I think it's a great read for anyone who supervises or even wants to supervise, as again, the book includes examples about both good and bad bosses, as well as helpful lists such as tricks for taking charge and the recipe for an effective apology. Today I'm going to highlight just a couple of the ways Sutton encourages readers to be a good boss. And the first, and this is really the overall theme of the book, it's that the best bosses take steps to create effective and humane workplaces. Being effective is defined as having grit, taking control, dealing with tough situations such as performance issues, and having the perseverance to reach long-term goals. A humane workplace is defined as one in which employees are listened to, treated with respect, know that the boss has their backs, and where wins are celebrated. Best bosses are able to create a healthy balance between being both effective and humane. According to the author, 75% of the workforce reports that their immediate supervisor is the most stressful part of their job. And I found this to be a staggering number and a reason why creating an effective and humane workplace is so important. The book emphasizes how the boss at the top of the organization treats his or her direct reports, ends up creating this ripple effect that can influence the system's ultimate success or failure. And for libraries, keeping our staff engaged and happy can in turn affect other staff and then ultimately trickle down to our customers and our community. Good Boss, Bad Boss also encourages bosses to be wise. 3 of the ways mentioned include listen to those under your supervision. So when you're really listening, you are in the moment. You're not pretending to listen, but you're in the moment asking questions and learning from others at the table. What this book states is that if you don't listen, your employee's dignity is undermined because they will feel as if they are not heard or respected. You can listen during both formal and informal meetings by making staff feel comfortable emailing you with questions or ideas, and when you're out and about in your organization. Which leads us to the second way to be wise, which is walk around your organization, observe, and ask questions. Again, when you're out of your office, observing what is happening in your organization, you are creating an environment where your staff feel valued and where you obtain firsthand knowledge about what is really going on at that point of service. When you're paying attention, you are also less likely to make false assumptions about your staff or your situations. A meaningful example of a false assumption was given in the book. A stellar mechanic in a manufacturing plant wasn't documenting his work. His supervisor just assumed he wasn't documenting so that he could have an information edge over his coworkers, and he thought, well, he's pro-union, so he doesn't want to provide information to help supervisors if there's a strike. Well, finally, a foreman asked him, and the reason he wasn't documenting was because he had poor handwriting, and he just didn't want to have his writing on display. So by simply asking the mechanic why he wasn't documenting, the boss was able to get to the heart of the problem and can take corrective action instead of just assuming the worst. And then lastly, seek a healthy balance between courage and humility. And I love this point. The author's referring to being courageous enough to make a decision and act based on the information you currently have, but by balancing this courage with humility and knowing that the decision may need to be adjusted down the line. It doesn't mean to make careless decisions without necessary information, but rather not to be so arrogant that you think your way is always the right way. Sutton encourages supervisors to evaluate decisions in such a way that you look for signs that the decision is wrong. Be humble enough to challenge your beliefs and change your course if you find that you are wrong. And in my former organization, we call this a try it, fix it approach, and you get amazing results when bosses have this mindset as staff can become less afraid to try things too, knowing that being wrong the first time you try something is okay. And so common themes to wisdom are listening, learning, and showing respect for one's employees. And a good example of a boss who does this well is Jose Aponte, who's the director of the San Diego County Library. San Diego County Library has 33 branches and 2 bookmobiles and about 600 staff. But Jose makes it a goal to visit 2 to 5 branches per week to stay in touch with his staff. And I was amazed when he first told me this, that a director of such a large system would have what seemed to be such a sizable goal. But by getting out into the branches, Jose is able to foster communication with and engage his staff at all levels. He learns about the people in his organization, hears their ideas, and is able to personally engage with his library community. And although I briefly just covered a few of the ways to be wise today, you can obtain the author's list of 11 commandments for wise bosses as part of this webinar's resource list. So I am now going to hand the mic over to Deborah, who's going to present the second book regarding management and leadership.
Hi. I see from a lot of the comments on the chat that there's a common theme there of wanting a boss who's a great communicator, who's empowering, open to feedback, and supportive. All of those traits are exemplified in the next book, Employees First, Customers Second. It's written by Vineet Nayar, who's the CEO of a leading global corporation. And he has written a first-person account of how he transformed his company into a self-governing organization and how he transferred responsibility for change to the employees who work in what he calls the value zone. While it might seem a stretch to compare a global corporation with a library, even a large one, this book actually has a lot of relevance to libraries. One reason is because of the importance of the value zone. The value zone is a place in an organization where the company or library creates value with the customer. This zone is actually at the bottom of the enterprise, not the top, and this reality shapes much of the author's thinking. Nayar says, in a services company, in a knowledge economy, this zone lies in the interface between the customer and the employee. Paradoxically, these value creators are almost always accountable to bosses and managers, typically located at the top of the pyramid, who do not directly contribute to the value zone. What Nayar did was to turn his organization upside down and make his management accountable to those who create value. In order to strengthen the value zone and to move the focus away from the what of the service to the how of delivering value, he envisioned an inverted pyramid. By inverting this organizational pyramid, the bottom became the top and the top the bottom. In this way, the employees came first, the customers second, and, well, the managers third. The result set his company apart from the competition, created real and distinct value for the customers, and engaged and energized the employees. The premise is simple. If you treat employees well and support them, they do better work and keep their customers happy. Most of Nayar's book is devoted to the how of this transformation. The main goals were for the organization to be more transparent in its processes, to help employees be more involved in making decisions, and to encourage departments to work together to find solutions, instead of passing challenges up the chain. These goals were realized through a series of small, achievable steps. All of them could be modified to work in a library setting. These steps are summarized here. First is you and I, or you as in Y-O-U and I. This is Nayar's term to describe his open door policy. You plus I is an online forum where any employee anywhere in the world can post any question, which the CEO and his leadership team then answer. The questions and answers are available for all to see, and at times the CEO and senior managers also use the forum to ask him questions of the employees. It's important for the managers to let the employees know that they don't have all the answers and that the people at the bottom of the pyramid can give good advice also. The Smart Service Desk, or SSD, works much like a customer service desk, except that it is for internal problems, and the service tickets are directed to those in management or to any of what Nayar calls the enabling functions, such as HR, finance, or IT. To further his effort to invert the pyramid, Nayar also instituted more of a 360 performance review. The way this was implemented had a huge effect on the corporate structure, and if you're interested in how a 360 review can be very successful, I recommend reading the entire book. Another step Nayar took was to hold what he calls directions meetings. These are informal conversations around topics important to the employees. Senior managers stand up in front of the entire corporation, taking all questions and opening themselves to every comment. Just by being available and as transparent as they can be, the leadership team has built up trust with the employees. Nayar presents his ideas in a way that makes them scalable down to even a department or team level, so that they can be useful for managers at all levels within, say, a library. Even if you are not in a position to undertake big change in your organization, this book provides a refreshing description of a desirable place to work, along with new ways to think about your library's management structure.
And while Deborah goes on to the next book, we'd love all the attendees to share how your libraries have invested in your frontline staff.
The next book we're going to be talking about is The Intangibles of Leadership, the 10 qualities of superior executive performance. Now, what is the difference between a competent leader and an extraordinary one? The difference can be subtle, but management psychologist Richard Davis reveals characteristics that distinguish those who are great leaders. Through his work as a consultant to large corporations, he has discovered qualities that are common to the most successful leaders at the most senior management level. In his book, he describes these attributes, and he explains how to detect them in others and how to develop them in yourself. Here is his list of the 10 key qualities that make good leaders great. This list and a brief description are also on one of the handouts. What all these traits have in common is the theme of self-awareness. Davis emphasizes such qualities as wisdom, integrity, and self-insight. But how do you make such intangibles tangible? Each chapter of his book is devoted to one of these qualities, and all follow the format of answering the questions. How do you know it when you see it? How do you get it? And why does it matter? Thus, abstract concepts are given concrete descriptions and practical applications. For example, there is a chapter on executive maturity. What exactly is executive maturity, and how can you achieve it? I'd be interested if anybody has any chat comments on that one, too, as I continue reading what Davis says is executive maturity. Davis begins by giving examples of how people react under pressure, and he compares executives to champion poker players who are good at masking their reactions. But it isn't enough to be in control of your emotions. Knowing when to express your feelings can be a powerful communication tool. He then answers the question, how do you know executive maturity when you see it? By giving several examples. I'm sure we know it when we see it, but it's kind of hard to describe exactly what that might be and how to get it, I would think. Finally, Davis describes the 6 action strategies he believes are important to develop executive maturity in yourself. The first step is to learn to read the emotions of others and the subtle cues that you admit, as well as others. Then it is important to find a few trusted people with whom you can share your feelings and who can be trusted to give honest feedback. The third strategy is to help the people you lead manage their own moods. Also, don't take yourself too seriously and use humor when appropriate to diffuse tense situations. Then, be sure to pay attention to your body and keep fit, because psychological and physical health bolster each other. And finally, give yourself some downtime. Take vacations and disconnect from work occasionally. While most of us in the library world will never reach the rarefied height of a corporate CEO, these intangibles of leadership are helpful to anyone wanting to be a more effective leader and successful person. Next, we'll turn to some marketing books with Chris Brown.
Thanks, Deborah. So our next 2 books are Adrian C. Ott's The 24-Hour Customer, New Rules for Winning in a Time-Starved, Always Connected Economy, and John Jantz's The Referral Engine. Ott really covers our customers and how they're always connected and how they spend their time, how little time we actually have with them, and what we can do to reach them. While Jantz discusses how we can generate referrals, and Lisa will be also giving you examples from other libraries. So who are our customers in an always connected economy? Ott refers to them as the wired brains, and this indicates the large amount of time that we're spending connected to media. We spend about 8.5 hours a day as U.S. adults in front of screens, so TVs, PCs, cell phones, and other devices. And more than half of that time is spent in front of a TV, with nearly 48% multitasking. So not only are we spending a lot of time in front of them, but we're not really giving our undivided attention to them. So the result is really that we're more distracted than ever, and these are the customers and library patrons that are coming into our library. We only have so much time with them. So the question becomes, how much time do we have with them? And Ott gives us the number reported by the U.S. Labor Department of an average of 28 minutes a day, which is pretty slim. From there, he gives us strategies for how exactly we should be responding. The first is to increase dwell time, increase the amount of time that users spend with your products, and that increases the likelihood that they'll use them. So the most obvious example is to provide comfortable, warm atmospheres with warm colors. But Ott also has us thinking about how we increase dwell time for our virtual spaces. He used the example of Lucky Magazine, who provides a celebrity list of what they're buying and what they're wearing. And Lisa, Deb, and I got to thinking, how could libraries be doing this as well? We have a lot of celebrity authors at our libraries. Why not ask them for their favorite books and post those on our website? Our library had Rick Steves at our summer reading program last year. We could have asked him, what do you read when you travel, or what are your favorite books to take on a trip? And that could have been a really great way to incentivize our website. The next bit of advice is to look for triggers. So ask when our users think about us. When do they need information? What events trigger usage of a library? And what life stages trigger usage? When someone's starting a family, or when an adult's becoming a caregiver, and couching our services and programs in these terms. The last bit of advice is to reduce the time and effort it takes to get to you. And this is a real-world library example that it's called Snap and Go, and it uses QR codes. It was awarded a 2012 Cutting Edge Service Award by ALA's Office for Information Technology and America's Libraries for the 21st Century Subcommittee, as well as a PR Excellence Award by the California Library Association. So QR codes allow your users to access the library on the go with their mobile devices. One way that we've done that is we've included codes on buses throughout the county. So your user can simply be on the bus and snap a code and start downloading an audiobook. This is reducing the time and the need for them to actually come in and pick out a book. They can do it simply on their commute. So we're using it to make it, to reduce that time and effort to access. The last way we use it is we include QR codes on popular literature. So instead of a user needing to go to your website and find related books to a popular book, they simply scan the QR code and see a list of recommended reads that might be of interest to them. And now I'll hand it over to Lisa to discuss the referral engine.
Thanks, Chris. Author John Jantsch states that the referral engine offers a systematic approach to generating word of mouth as a calculated and comprehensive marketing strategy. And he shows you how to draft a strategy that compels customers and partners to voluntarily participate in your marketing and create a positive buzz for your organization or business. Prior to writing this book, he conducted an informal survey of several thousand small business owners and found that 63% felt that over half their business came from referrals, which demonstrates that this word of mouth is powerful. So let's take a minute and if you would type in the chat box the name of a business that you refer people to and just briefly state why. And for me, I had to think about this because I'm not a big referrer, and I refer people to the Rainbow Cleaners in Roseville, where I live, because they do really great work. Like if you need seamstress work done, their prices are competitive and they have a fast turnaround. And I found this book to be very business-oriented and focused on creating systematic referrals for sales. It delves into things like customer life cycles, how to make obtaining word of mouth an essential part of your culture, convincing people to pay for what you do, and creating a referral follow-up process. However, the more I read, the more I found aspects that could be applied to libraries. And the first is in the realm of creating convergence. And the book defines convergence as bringing technology and engagement together. We just heard from Chris how Contra Costa is doing this with the use of QR codes. But the author explains that within a referral marketing system, the strategy is on being found by customers instead of going out and finding them. The book mentions that the way to do this is to create valuable content that will engage and enable you to interact where your potential customers or your library users are. The author talks about content and web presence as part of generating leads for referrals, but I think that combining online and offline strategies works well for libraries too. By combining these strategies, libraries can really engage with their users and create a positive buzz. When I was researching for this webinar, I found a library that does this very well. It's the Buffalo and Erie County Public Library in New York, and they have an e-community branch on their website. This e-community page contains a myriad of online strategies to engage the community, including blogs, social networking, and podcasts, which are 3 of the tools that are mentioned in the book. Buffalo and Erie County combines this online presence with an offline presence in their community. Central Library and Adult Outreach Manager Dan Caulfield attends job fairs, Chamber of Commerce meetings, and promotes the library as an information source by teaching workshops about library resources. Many of us do not have the resources to create convergence this extensively or at this level, but I encourage you to start in whatever way you can. According to this book, a referral strategy actually targets 2 groups. You have your customer base as well as your strategic partners who also serve your customers but who could be motivated to partner with you in exchange for referrals. Per the book, these strategic partners provide the real untapped referral opportunities. So one aspect of the referral culture is to seek and develop strategic partner relationships, which add value to your existing customers as you may be introducing them to a new source of information, generating additional referrals, and enabling you to appeal to a broader audience. This book also mentions implementing a combined workshop as a partnering strategy, as it enables you to work together to meet each other's customers, increasing your own exposure. So Sophie Bruno, who's a librarian at the Placer County Library, has used this combined workshop practice to build a really great strategic partnership with the Auburn chapter of the Hip Hop Congress. The library wanted to have a writing workshop for teens, and the Hip Hop Congress had a grant to implement a writing workshop, but they needed a space. So this partnership was born, and it's now developed in such a way that the library users are now familiar with Hip Hop Congress and what this group is all about. And in return, the library has 30 young adults. Many who were not previously library users are now meeting in the library on a regular basis. And I have to give one more real-world example for this book, because the event the Sacramento Public Library hosted to celebrate and generate interest in a new product, their Espresso book machine, created a buzz that was brought back to my library system by our friends at the Placer County Library, who are now telling their friends and family, and so on. Sacramento invited not only the library community to this event, but many writers groups, because for those of you who haven't heard, this machine that is now housed in their central library prints books on demand, and it's very cool. Sacramento emulated a number of ideas from this book. They found something that made them unique, which was the machine. They determined this product's ideal customer, which was the writers groups. They engaged customers and potential customers by inviting them to an event. They provided education by showing the machine in action, and they gave giveaways or handouts about the Espresso book machine to pass on to others. They also opened up a section of the library as part of the event and promoted the library as an important community resource. So the referral engine mentions that throwing a party at completion of a project, but as Sacramento shows, it's a great idea to have an event as you implement a project to get the word out about your new program or service. So to wrap up this section, we want to make sure that we don't forget the value of inviting people to an event or party as part of a marketing strategy, because librarians, we love to party. So I am now turning the mic over to Deborah to begin a new section on organizational dynamics.
Thank you, Lisa. In this information age, organizations that don't share information simply cannot evolve fast enough to keep up with the pace of change. Libraries in particular need to learn to do things differently. Collaboration and cross-training are essential for an organization to be competent and competitive. And trust must be built through transparency so that employees will be loyal, engaged, and productive. While libraries don't compete in the financial marketplace, libraries are competing for customers, and the same standards apply. The 3 books we are discussing about organizational dynamics address these issues and provide solid examples of how libraries can benefit from new organizational practices. The first book is on the next slide, which is Profit at the Bottom of the Ladder. Lisa, do you want to move the slide? Thank you. The first book in this section, Profit at the Bottom of the Ladder, has a lot of similarities with the first book I spoke about, which was Employees First, Customers Second, because it also puts the focus back on employees. We've been talking about the effects on customers, but then we're just kind of going back again to the importance of employees, because in this book, the authors explain the value of increasing the well-being of your employees, particularly those at the bottom of the pay scale. Of all these books we've been reviewing, this is the one probably least applicable to libraries because its focus is primarily on raising wages and benefits. It is an academic book with case studies of how companies around the world have improved the lot of their employees and in the process gained increased productivity and success. Nonetheless, the new business model described in Profit at the Bottom of the Ladder offers several suggestions of benefit to libraries. First of all, focus on employees. The authors stress that it is important for leaders to understand who performs the majority of the essential work in their organizations. These are often the front line or customer-facing workers, and an organization's success depends on the quality of the work of those who carry out the labor. As obvious as this may seem, the authors state that Remarkably few firms currently structure their work environments to optimize the efforts of employees at the bottom of the corporate ladder, even when these employees are central to creating the firm's added value. Once managers realize the importance of their employees, they will see that quality and productivity depend on a workforce that is healthy, well prepared to carry out their tasks, and motivated. Managers also need to realize that the frontline workers are often the ones who know best how to increase the efficiency and quality. Leaders can then develop a strategy to achieve the goals of raising productivity and quality while also lowering costs. The most useful part of the book is this blueprint for effective change. Here the authors provide the practical steps they see as necessary for both employees and organizations to profit together. First, they suggest that appropriate incentives be provided, not only with compensation, but by creating more of a team-based organization that involves employees in greater decision-making. It is also essential to look after employee health and to provide training at every level so employees feel prepared and competent. And finally, it is important to engage the frontline staff and to act on their best recommendations. This is accomplished by creating an environment of transparency with open book management, open communication, and teamwork. Next, we'll have Chris talk about the mesh.
Thanks, Deborah. So Lisa Gansky's The Mesh, why the future of business is sharing. And she looks at a new business model that doesn't sell products but shares them. A key example would be Zipcar. They don't make or sell cars, but they share cars. And reading this book, I realized libraries already do that. We already share a ton of stuff. But there are some things that we can learn from these companies that really track usage quite well. A perk of being a company that shares is that you increase the interaction with your users. You don't sell them a product once, but you let them borrow it over and over. So they come back to you more, you get more interaction, which generates greater knowledge. An example of this would be Zipcar, and the way that in Portland, they outfit their cars with bike racks and partner with Parks and Rec to offer free passes to users. So they've learned more about them. We all are familiar with Netflix as well, in the way that they use prior selections and rated films to recommend your next film to watch. So that's something that libraries can really be looking at. And this next slide is an example of the mesh in libraries. This comes from Contra Costa County Library as well. It's Discover and Go, and it really uses a relevant delivery to increase value for patrons. So users can book passes to museums all online, and we also track usage. So we can recommend underutilized museums or forgotten exhibits, stuff that gets overlooked, and recommend these to our patrons as well. We also track usage to increase value for our museum partners. Traditionally, museums donate passes and they open access, but through our online system, we can actually tell them where they're developing audiences. But most importantly is that the software is shareable across multiple ILS systems. And we tested and proved this with Alameda County Library, which uses a different ILS. And now I'm going to pass this on to Lisa.
Oh, thanks, Chris. Switch is all about change management, and the subtitle of this book is How to Change Things When Change is Hard. The authors state that their goal with this book was to make change easier, to teach a framework that is simple enough to remember and yet flexible enough to use in many different situations. And the book provides a new way to look at change, as well as theories of why people may resist change and how this resistance can be conquered. And really, who isn't undergoing some change right now? And frequently, when you try to implement change in an organization, you face some resistance. So I think this book is very applicable to libraries, as implementing and adapting to change is something that we seem to need to do on a continual basis. According to the authors, the leader of change must first influence the environment or change the person's situation, as well as influence that person's heart and mind. The authors talk about influencing the elephant, or the motivational side of the brain, where there are emotions, instincts, and energy, as well as the rider, or the side of the brain that affects direction, long-term thinking, planning, and analyzing. Effective change management will address and appeal to both the elephant and the rider. So according to the book, book, to make change happen, you need to make 3 things happen. And the first is that you need to direct the writer. One surprise about change is that what looks like resistance is often just a lack of clarity. So if you want people to change, you must provide clear direction. Again, the writer is the thinker and the planner, but they also have a tendency to overanalyze and have that paralysis by analysis. So if you want people to change, you can boost their motivation and determination. And one way to do this is what the authors call finding the bright spot, or determining what's working and how you can do more of it. So if you're focusing on bright spots, you're focusing on solutions rather than on problems. The idea of using bright spots works well because, according to the authors, these flashes of success can illuminate the road for action and spark the hope that change is possible. When the road ahead looks difficult, it's motivating and encouraging to take a minute to remember what your organization is doing right. In Placer County Library, we documented bright spots during one of our quarterly branch managers meetings. One of the bright spots identified by staff was the success we are having with some of our partnerships and outreach, including the Hip Hop Congress, the Boys and Girls Club, and some of our local schools. We can now use this analysis of what we're doing right and apply some of these strategies when we either work on creating new partnerships or work on improving the ones we already have. So if you're having trouble with the writers in your organization who are overanalyzing and wanting to focus on what's not working, try working together to find bright spots. As per the authors, this is the best way to direct the writer when you are trying to bring about change. The second thing the book says you need to do in leading change is to motivate the elephant. Remember, the elephant is the motivational side of the brain where there are emotions, instincts, and energy. So to appeal to the elephant, the authors recommend that you find the feeling in the change or find what will invoke the emotional appeal of the change. Now is the time to bring out your stories, and in libraries, I think we have great stories. The lives that will continue to be affected if you can change your service model or shift your resources to maintain your open hours or after-school programs, for example. Focus on the emotional impacts of the change. And then the third thing they say to do when leading a change process is to shape the path. Shaping the path is making the journey to change easier. What looks like a people problem, for example, resistant staff, is often just a situational problem. People may not be defiant, but proceeding down what to them is the easiest path. So a way to shape the path and influence the environment is to make the right ways easier and the wrong ways harder. An example from my own system is a way we are trying to bring about change in regard to weeding. As with many libraries, we still have some adversity to weeding, as well as what seems to be a mindset in some of our branches that it's discarding of books is a job for reference staff. So what we needed to change was this mindset and get all staff on board with owning the collection and the maintenance of the collection, because books in really bad condition are being checked in and reshelved, which completely bypass the reference staff anyway. So what we did to make the right behaviors easier was to create this ugly book contest, and now all volunteers and staff who find materials in really bad shape can set them aside for review. The ugliest books are going to be voted on, and we're going to have 2 winners who will receive gift certificates. But with this contest, all staff are empowered to participate in this process and will be encouraged to continue to participate and help maintain the collection even when the contest is over. So before we move on to the next category, I wanted to tell everyone who is undergoing change process to not get discouraged. Leading a change process requires persistence, so don't give up if you hit some resistance. And I did not mean to rhyme there, but it did. I also think that this book by the Heath Brothers is a really great resource. Okay, so now I'm going to hand the mic over to Chris, who's going to talk about our last category, which is success.
Thank you, Lisa. So we've covered literature and management, organizational dynamics, and marketing. So now we're moving on to personal success with John P. Cotter's buy-in, saving your good idea from getting shot down. And Cotter and Lauren Whitehead focus on counterintuitive strategies to saving your good ideas. We've all had genuinely good ideas that maybe we haven't communicated as well as we could. But I thought a really good question for the group and participants was those that have had success conveying their proposals, if they could type them in the chat box about what really worked for you. So what bright spots really stood out for you, and what did you succeed with? So the first bit of advice is to let the attackers in and to understand that when your ideas get attacked, these actually really help because they help you face the single greatest challenge of gaining people's attention. And that without attention, you can't really gain any sort of emotional commitment with your audience. But what do you do once you do get some pushback? The thing to really avoid is how you respond to attacks to really stay away from too much data, which causes minds to wander. Don't go through your points again or your logic or assess alternatives. We want to provide clear, simple, common sense ideas that are going to win minds. And you maybe already pitched, you will have pitched your data in the beginning, but you don't want to go back to your data if you encounter any sort of pushback. So the way you win hearts is through respect. After you've conveyed a simple, clear, common sense idea, you show your audience respect, even those that are disagreeing with you. And after you've won the hearts and minds of your audience, you want to make sure that you don't get distracted by the minority. You don't want to be pulled into a debate or obsessed by one clever attack on your idea. You want to focus on the majority who determine whether or not your idea gets accepted. And the last bit of advice from Buy-in is to not wing it, to brainstorm common attacks and effective responses before you pitch, which will reduce defensiveness on your part. And the book provides a number of examples and responses in the book to help you brainstorm and strategize. And now I'm passing it over to Deborah to wrap up.
We found that LJ's Best Business Books provided a rich resource as we looked for new helpful practices that we can use in our libraries. We learned what makes a good boss and a superior leader. We learned how to build value through our employees, how to develop a humane workplace, and how to communicate with an always connected customer. We found good ways to build referrals, and finally, how to foster change and generate buy-in to make our projects more successful. And instead of using next year's list as just a tool for collection development, we'll be looking for even more good business ideas that are relevant to how we run our libraries. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you found some new ideas and that by looking at some new business books, you've discovered another avenue for inspiration as you work to improve your libraries. Thank you also to our colleagues who contributed so much information and real-world examples. And thank you also to the InfoPeople staff and the Eureka Project for all their guidance and help. We'll take any questions you have now, but please feel free to contact any one of us by email after the webinar if you want more information.
One of the questions I see in Q&A down there is, what besides the QR code is on the poster you were speaking of? I asked this to know what use the poster is to someone that can't scan.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Thanks, Chuck. It's coming from Ian Hertz. And we use the poster also as a push to market the fact that you can use these. So, of course, not everyone's going to be running around with a smartphone and going to be able to use QR codes, but just the posters themselves on buses let people know that in the future, if they're shopping for a smartphone, they may want to get one that they're going to be able to use on their commute. So it's pushing out the fact that this is a facet of our library services, that we can meet their need on their commute. And I see Erica Gonzalez asked what a QR code is. It's a quick response code. You're seeing them a lot used by businesses now. They're a little barcode. They're a square. You'll see them like at Macy's, and it's a way for people to scan it with their cell phone and be linked to data or a service or an offer.
Does anyone have any other questions they'd like us to address?
Lisa, do you want to take Bethia's question?
Sure. Bethia asks, let's see, do your libraries provide staff meetings where staff is welcome to submit questions and ideas? In Placer County, we're really spread out, so we do not have regular all-staff meetings. In fact, we just had our first last August. So it doesn't really happen in staff meetings, but we do get out and about and talk to our staff a lot, and I hope that they feel comfortable submitting questions. I mean, I do when I'm out and about. I try to ask. And I know at each of our branches, at the bigger branches, they do have staff meetings. And again, I think there's a lot of discussion from the minutes that I see. They do have a lot of discussion, so yes. And I came from Roseville. I've been here in Placer County for a year, and I know like in the Roseville Library they do that where, once a month they have an all-staff meeting. And I think if you can do it logistically, it's great. I'm all for meetings when they can be effective.
And Lisa, do you want to mention San Diego County's committee, the non-committee committee?
Oh, yeah. Do you want to share that, Chris?
Sure. So we've also heard about San Diego County Library that has a committee that doesn't have administrative staff on it or senior staff. They use bottom of the ladder staff to address issues and service issues and really have a flatter conversation and a place that's going to be maybe more receptive to questions. I always thought that that was a really cool example of reducing hierarchy in a committee.
Well, and I like what Manya put in the chat box too from Sacramento, because Sacramento has 29 branches, so they have a huge system too. And she said they have a couple ways that staff can suggest new ideas anonymously, which I think is great. I mean, it's nice when it can be in person, but it's nice if you also have the option to have a suggestion box, something like that, so staff can put their idea down. I'm sorry, Deb, go ahead.
I was going to say, our library has an annual staff meeting where the library actually closes for a day and all staff gets together, and that's a chance for everyone to be able to ask questions of the director. I don't know how common that is in other libraries, but it does seem to be helpful here, and we've been doing it for several years.
I like the suggestion box idea too. Again, in Roseville they had something called systems in the way. So if there's a process or, that was kind of getting in the way, so you're trying to help a customer and you can't because of a procedure or a policy that's in place, you could submit this system in a way, and you can do it anonymously or not, but it really created some good discussion points and made us really evaluate policies and kind of why we have the policy in place. So again, I like that idea too, like Sacramento's doing too. I think there was another question too.
Yeah, Betsy Aldridge is asking, anybody have any favorite blogs? Did you keep up with the business literature or management literature through any blogs? I
am not a blogger, so I don't know about Chris and Deborah. I like books.
I look at blogs for more like leisure stuff, good ideas for like what to do on vacations and, what to cook. Not so much for business literature. I think that's why we chose the Library Journal, is because it helps us narrow that field of what to discuss and what, best business books we should be looking at.
Well, and Librarian in Black too. I mean, I have to check her out every once in a while too. She'll have something good. So Terry, has Fresno County been a library for 100 years? I mean, really, 100 years? I think those annual staff meetings are great, and I hope we can do it again this year in Placer County. It's especially when you're so spread out. I mean, for us, it was the first time some of our staff even got a chance just to meet each other. It's just a great way to share things from the top down, like in one, so it's consistent. There's a consistent message that gets out.
And am I right that all the chat box will be available later? I guess that's a question for Stanley, Eileen, or Jeff.
Yeah, Eileen. Yeah, Eileen is saying yes because there's some good there's some good suggestions coming in here.
Yeah, I can see that people have also thrown out some authors that they like, so I think that'll be cool for anyone else who watches it archived.
Oh, the name of the first book that was reviewed, that was one of the questions.
Oh, Good Boss.
And that was, Good Boss, Bad Boss. That was the first book.
I really like this book, and it's an easy read. I mean, it's a really fast read. It's got these really handy-dandy lists, and yeah, I enjoyed it. Okay, any other questions? And Kristen, thanks for recommending Books on the Nightstand. I hadn't heard about that, but I'm going to add it to my list. Maybe that's a blog I will read.
Well, and as we mentioned in the text chat, and I'll mention it again right now, that we will be archiving the text chat, and we just had a question about how we can get the PowerPoint for this webinar. The slides for the webinar, as well as links to the archive, will all be available on the page on which you got into this in the first place. We'll post that link into the text chat as well. There, Stanley just did that very thing. So I'd like to thank Chris, Lisa, and Deborah for an informative webinar, and thank all of you for attending, and hope to see you at our next